Live from Brussels and Athens, it's Sedan Live. Welcome to episode 393. I'm Mira Matesh, Senior Director at Sedan, and our special guest today is Gökşen Çalışkan, who is a media and communications professional with over a decade of experience in EU affairs, advocacy, business development, as well as managing EU-funded projects. And she's a senior advisor at Euractiv. She's also an activist involved in various projects focusing on different topics like democracy, equal rights, and gender equality. Gökşen, welcome. Welcome on board.
Thank you, Iram. It's a pleasure to join this conversation today.
Very happy to have you as well. I want to start with some basic questions and ask you what has inspired you to pursue a career in media and communications?
I wish I had a very cool story about it. I did not initially have an idea to pursue a career in news media or comms when I was a kid, probably like many of us, right? I feel like there were some breadcrumbs, if I can put it like that, on my way that kind of I collected, and all of them led me to this path. First of all, due to my father's profession, who was a public servant with some diplomatic roles at times, we frequently moved to different locations, both within Turkey, where I am originally from, and abroad, mostly the eastern part of the world, let's say, almost every 2 years. So I guess I figure the importance of communication skills at an early age in that sense. I'm a big introvert. I don't show it that often, but I'm a big introvert at heart, meaning I get my energy in quieter spaces. But when you are always this, new girl in town, in the neighborhood, at school, you gotta find a way to survive, right? By building up your communication skills so that you would feel welcome, accepted, belonging to this new place, and so on. So I don't think I thought it through at the time, but now looking back, I can see how much that experience actually taught me. Thanks to this, nomadic lifestyle and upbringing, I decided to pursue a career in international relations. Initially, hoping and aspiring to become a diplomat. And during my studies, I focused a lot on the EU. However, I soon realized this hierarchical world of the public service and diplomacy wouldn't be a right fit for me. So I decided to switch basically my focus to other areas without knowing actually what might happen. I did lots of voluntary work for NGOs during my studies, including supporting, gender equality initiatives, and also an international women's film festival. That was kind of an entry point for me to the comms and media world, because I was helping out, with the journalists within the comms team, and it was extremely fulfilling and impactful. And then one day, I had a part-time job where I kind of traveled to the southeastern part of Turkey, close to the Syrian border, way before the war, for a project funded by the EU and some international organizations. And that made me realize how much I like to be in the field and again, work on something impactful in a tangible way. So after that experience, I applied for a scholarship that was funded by the EU and the Turkish state to do my master's in London. And the program was on communication policy studies. So that was part of the sociology department, and I was deep diving into EU's telecoms and media regulations. That was, I think, the first conscious entry point for me to get to understand media policies, particularly the developments in online news media sphere. And all of a sudden, I realized that media actually ticks lots of boxes for me. One is the social impact aspect, informing the masses to holding the powerful accountable. The second one was it's super fast-paced environment, dynamic, constant learning experience. And then the last thing was this, I think, creativity in terms of storytelling, the narratives, formats, and so on. So I finished my master's. I went back to Turkey and started working as a reporter covering EU-Turkey relations. So that also helped me travel to Brussels quite often. I know it's a long story, but through my 20s, I think I spent lots of time to learn and do different things. While I was a reporter, I was getting to understand the media business side. And advertising is one of the revenue streams, but there were the native events were coming stronger. So I decided eventually to move from the journalistic side to the business side of it. And that experience, I think, opened up the whole communications world to me in a more holistic way. So I work with lots of, national and international media organizations, but also as a consultant to private and civil society organizations when it comes to strategic comms development, media relations, event management, and so on. And in the end, in 2017, I got a job offer from Euractiv to join their team in the headquarters in Brussels. And I've been working with our advocacy lab team, working closely with external stakeholders, helping them with their advocacy and communications objectives by using Euractiv's media solutions. In a nutshell, this is how it worked out. And I see myself, lastly, as part of this small group of professionals who had the opportunity to build a career based on what we actually studied. That, I think, gives me a certain sense of satisfaction. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it has been a great journey so far.
Absolutely. I think that doesn't come very often, that people do what they studied for. And honestly, I always love hearing people's stories about how they've ended up in Brussels, especially the communicators and the public affairs, bubble, because it's always very, very interesting and very unique stories to tell. You also recently joined one of our workshops this summer, focusing on digital advocacy and new and emerging trends in the space. What role do you think social media have in shaping policy conversations?
Well, I think it has a huge role, but let me start by telling this. I mean, the tech world and media world, which are very much interconnected, they are advancing and growing in such an exponential pace. And I cannot really imagine how the future of the digital media will look like in the next 3 to 5 years. But I know that digital media, social media platforms especially, are increasingly becoming a critical tool in shaping public, policy and opinion in the EU. I mean, if we start with the elephant in the room, that everything is kind of linked to these days, AI, I see it as a both kind of facilitator, enabler, and also a disruptor. One of the major criticisms that we see in the EU or the EU gets is that it is too complex to comprehend and that it cannot really communicate and connect with the citizens, right? And thanks to AI, I think we almost passed this language barrier. It has never been that easy from my perspective to translate and localize content to inform people about what is happening in the EU and how it impacts our day-to-day lives. And social media platforms play an increasing role when it comes to the dissemination part of this type of content. And in the future, I think it will be even more localized and authentic, from accents to images and so on. But on the other hand, I see that the increasing use of AI is in generating content specifically, including deepfakes or hyper-realistic simulations, will make it challenging to distinguish between the authentic and manipulated information. And I believe this is a risk to public opinion, as mis and disinformation can easily sway the public discourse. That's why I think EU will be challenged a lot on the regulatory frameworks when it comes to combating disinformation while trying to ensure that the freedom of expression is still there. Another thing, I think this is a whole huge chapter for me, which is super close to my heart. AI and digital media democratize information access by giving us, the citizens, individuals, the opportunity to engage and contribute to public debate in different ways, from online public consultations to reacting to any political and policy campaigns by stakeholders via social media platforms. And this is going to go on and on. Yet there is this issue, the power is centralized, meaning it is in the hands of those who own and control the data and the algorithms intentionally and unintentionally reinforce biases, resulting in echo chambers. And I think we will see this more in the future. That's why we got to really promote media literacy to make sure that diverse views are accessible to all citizens. Another trend that I see is the emergence of new digital public spheres, such as virtual reality spaces, decentralized platforms powered by blockchain technologies. And I think when it comes to the virtual reality, we've already started to see a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, last year, some events taking place in virtual spaces, virtual reality spaces. But I think it's going to get more common, I think, as we move on. These spaces will create alternative arenas for public debate, for policy communication, and so on. But let's see how the EU will tackle with these places. And maybe one last thing, since news media itself is something that I kind of deal with every day. AI brings lots of new possibilities, futures, to tools to journalism to boost productivity, creativity, data analysis, and also distributing things through social media platforms in the best way possible. But in response to this, how I can put it, diverse social media landscape and also this generative AI solutions, our news consumption habits change. We avoid news more than ever through traditional channels, including the online media publications. We only check things on social media, right? And due to the heavy regulatory efforts to combat disinformation, the platforms are slowly reducing their news content, and especially the political content. And on top, as we users increasingly rely on AI chatbots like ChatGPT for news, we bypass the traditional online publications. That's why the financial stability of the industry is shaking heavily. There is decline in traffic, there is a slowdown in subscription growth, and there's huge decline in ad revenue that leads to a reduction in the sources for journalism. And for me, I think even though we will go and distribute things on social media, when the media outlets, quality media outlets, struggle with the business models and revenue generation exercise, I think this not only endangers the quality and the depth of reporting, but also in a way complicates the ability to shape informed public opinion. And I think, this is something that I'm very much concerned about. As you can see, there are pros and cons, but this is how it goes, I think, in every occasion.
Yes, and I think this mass polarization, as you've also touched upon, is one of the downsides of social media and these new platforms. And a lot of people are dwelling on, of course, the negatives, also especially recently with what we've been experiencing, some of the new platforms and everything. But I also see social media and online platforms as giving us some sense of transparency and accountability compared to how things and how policies was communicated to masses and general audiences before. I think we forget about the times when there was no social media at all.
Exactly.
And we relied on very limited amount of information from very set amounts of outsources. And now we have this availability and freedom to be able to engage with also individuals. We are now taking that as a given, and we are focusing on the negative instead of focusing on the positive and also trying to see how we can improve that.
Exactly. And maybe I'll give you an example that I kind of see the hope more and more when it comes to EU-Turkey relations. We know that the traditional media in both in Europe and Turkey are struggling financially, as I just touched upon, making it more vulnerable to political influence, right? And this often results in the media outlets pushing for more government narratives, if this is the right thing to say, instead of providing more, independent, objective reporting. And the traditional media sometimes, even if not quite often, limits the opposing voices. We see it in Turkey, but not necessarily in Turkey. We see in many European countries facing the same challenges. And here comes the social media offering an alternative space for different views, right? For those who feel left out in a way by mainstream media. And then the other thing, I think, I listened to a keynote speech this week by Donald Robin. So he is the founding editor-in-chief of the Wired magazine, the UK edition. And he said something that really struck me. He said, people don't care about data, they care about stories. And I believe the really key to improving, relationships between, countries, regions, and, communities lies in engaging on an either personal or civil society level. And even though, for instance, in the EU-Turkey relations situation, even though, let's say, the official accession process is kind of stalled, there's still huge opportunity for dialogue and cooperation, if you ask me. Social media, for instance, can be an even more powerful tool and support mechanism in raising awareness, debunking myths, boosting dialogue, and eventually reaching broader audiences. So huge potential there, as long as we know how to use it for the good.
Exactly, exactly. And you touched upon storytelling and the importance of storytelling. So I'll ask you another question about that. It's now the rentrée period, obviously. Public affairs and communication space is buzzing with everyone being back in Brussels. Have you seen any recent policy or communication campaigns or materials that you came across that stood out from the masses that you liked and engaged with?
That's a very good question. First of all, this election year was very special for me, as it was my very first time that I had the right to vote as an EU citizen. So that was really special. I must say the comms environment was quieter, obviously for different reasons. There was not much policy conversation going on. So people, I think, were a little bit shy to push for their messages very openly and rather wait for this period exactly to start their communications. But as we know, in Brussels, there is this, habit of creating, manifestos, vision papers, and so on. And I think we saw a bit of that happening. There are a couple of things that I like seeing. One is the campaigns that focus on, first of all, not necessarily for asking from the policymakers, the manifestos, for instance, the ones that they are focusing more on with giving mentality rather than just taking. I love them the most. I also saw some, offline campaigns connecting the online efforts. So I really like to see, instead of, saying I'm writing a manifesto and this is what we want from the new mandate, from the new policymakers, and so on. Instead of that, I like the narratives that say how we can contribute. This is our contribution. This is how we can help achieve these goals. So this giving mentality rather than just taking it, I liked, and I would love to see more of that. And the other trend we see is combining the social media communication with real life experiences. And we see and hear a lot of these, policy experiences these days. And I think this is going to be a good new trend in town and maybe for the broader advocacy communicators. I think these two are, for me, that are the best cases that stay with me. And I like to see combination of both online and offline. I think that is the best.
Yes, definitely. And I think what you say about the giving back and this being a two-way street for policy makers and communicators too is extremely valid. And I think that's maybe a little bit of a different approach that we hadn't seen a lot before. I also noticed some of the campaigns, probably the ones you are mentioning as well, around the summer period too. And I think that's going to make maybe a difference in how we engage with politicians and how we engage with policymakers also. Coming out with our side of the story and offering something in return as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, as you said, it's so true. It's a two-way, it's a relational thing, right? So we gotta really show that we understand who we are talking to and what they expect. And especially the newcomers, the MEPs, they are new in town. So they are probably bombarded with so much information, and you got to find ways to stand out. That's why I feel like the combination of different tools and channels, and I see events becoming more and more kind of, especially after the COVID period, we see more and more in-person conversations, and they are adding another spice to the whole, efforts to influence, basically.
Yes. And Gökşen, you're also actively involved with Restless Brussels, which is a community that aims bringing international people in Brussels a bit closer to the city they live in. You've mentioned that you have recently become Belgian, so you are no longer part of that international-only community. But your efforts in bringing those people closer together to what their cities are doing for them is very reputable, I think. How did you end up in Brussels? I mean, you actually mentioned about that, but how did you end up getting involved in activism on this topic and participating in Restless Brussels particularly?
Thanks so much for this question. I mean, it's really another thing that is so close to my heart. First of all, I think I longed for a home all my life because of the experience that I had during my childhood. And I didn't know where I feel more belonging to during, like with my upbringing, let's say. And I was desperately looking for a place that I could really connect with people and that have more or less similar experiences. So when I first arrived Brussels, which was I think 2009 for the first time, so 15 years ago, I was just fascinated. And the funny thing is that I saw the eastern part of the world, thanks to my father, first before I saw the West. So when I first arrived Brussels, I was like surrounded by international people who have similar experiences, who speak different languages, who all feel like a little bit of foreigner, but also local to the city. That was the first thing that I think kind of in a way planted the seed for me for sometime in the future that I really wanted to live in the city. So when I moved in 2017, I started immediately working in the EU bubble. Obviously, I also decided to live close to the bubble for one single reason, because before this experience, I used to live in Istanbul, which is a huge city with 20 million people. And I lived in one part of the city, the Asian part, and worked in the European part, which made me commute at least 1.5 hours one way every single day. So probably you know it, what it feels.
Yeah, yeah.
When I arrived here, I said, nope, I don't want to commute. I just want to walk. So I ended up in the EU bubble, both for work and private life. And that was just my life. And for years. And eventually, when years passed, I realized that, okay, I know the bubble, but how much do I know about Brussels as a city? So when I made my mind to become a national, so I started digging into different, opportunities, what I could do, how I could get more information. And this is when I came across Restless Brussels. So last year, I think in May, it was the time it was founded. Initially, I was not as available to actively participate in the events, but in September last year, I started joining actively, and I also expressed my interest to be part of it as much as possible because I saw that it was such a unique idea, an opportunity for those international who are looking for some information, looking for some hooks and links to be able to connect with the realities of the city that we live, that we make our lives, that we raise our kids, and so on. So with Restless Brussels, we organized tens of events over the last 1.5 years. It's gonna be, and bring in experts, local experts from urban planning to mobility to education to the use of languages and so on, so that people can really get how things are shaped, how the political decisions are taken or not managed to be taken. What are the challenges? Because, as expats, we have this, tendency to complain a lot about the city. And for those in Brussels coming from other places, this is kind of a national sport, I like to call. We talk about the city and we kind of rant about it, but we don't necessarily take action to shape it, to change it. And this year with Restless Brussels, we did a good campaign, a great campaign, if not great, to mobilize the international community to register to vote for the local elections, because this is where many decisions that affect our day-to-day life in the city are taken. So hopefully on the 13th of October, those who registered to vote will show up and cast their votes and hopefully contribute to the future of the city even more.
That's amazing. Exactly. I think Brussels is a very unique city from that point of view, exactly like you've explained. It is a multinational city, but compared to other big cities like London, Paris, I think it also has a very large population of international expats, European or non-European, actually. I had read somewhere that Brussels is the second city with the largest international population after Dubai, which we know to be a very, international city. So it's a shame for all these people that live here and work here and enjoy the benefits or downfalls of the city not to be able to to vote to make a say, have a say in who and how it is governed?
Absolutely. I think one thing is, I mean, if we talk about the numbers, 1/3 of the Brussels population is non-Belgian born, residents. So it's a huge number, huge number.
Yes.
I mean, I wish we could have done more to really mobilize them, but that was a good exercise. And in the end, we registered more than ever EU nationals for the local election. And speaking of the Dubai and Brussels comparison, there are different arguments around it. Yes, apparently the population-wise, the number of people is bigger, larger in Dubai. But when we look at the diversity of the nationalities, I think Brussels might even beat Dubai. That is something that I overheard, but I should confirm later on.
Probably, I wouldn't be surprised. But indeed, I think this coming election is almost 5 weeks from now. It's going to be a good opportunity for all the international communities to have a say in how their cities are governed.
Indeed.
So now we are coming to the end of our first segment. I want to ask you, what advice would you give to someone starting new in media and communications? With your years of experience now, how would you? What advice, would be good for newcomers into the bubble?
I love this question, really. I usually take notes of the things like both best practices and the kind of worst practices. And now I have this huge list, but I'll try to give you my top 5. First of all, I think building up relational skills, because communication is about, building relationship. And this links to emotions and psychology. So I would recommend everyone who's interested in getting into comms and media, I would recommend them to read more about psychology, emotions, active listening. It starts with that. Getting to know yourself, getting to know your audience, where they come from, what sort of mindset they are in, and so on. I think that's the first step to really be able to come up with authentic and empathic campaigns. And once you know who you are talking to and who you are yourself, I think the second thing I would say is to build up your sales, pitching, and storytelling skills. So for me, communication is all about, it is a game of persuasion, right? So whatever you do, writing a social media post, writing a news piece, pitching an idea to a journalist, writing a speech, whatever, you are trying to influence or get attention of someone. So you really need to look into how you can do best. So sales skills, check that out. And sales are usable in every stage of your life, be it with your relationship, when it comes to your relationship with your parents, your spouse, your partner, whatever, you will be fine. And negotiations is another thing. And I think this, creative storytelling aspect, it is important to pay attention to. The third thing is being open-minded about the career paths. So I wouldn't really recommend anyone to just go after, usual suspect roles. What I mean by that is being a journalist, right? Or being a social media content producer, or I don't know, graphic designer. There are so many opportunities, and these opportunities will just grow. Just go deeper. There are advertising operations. There are audience engagement roles. There are, animators, policy experience designers. So all sorts of things. I would recommend everyone to keep open eye and mind. And it is often, I believe, in these, less obvious roles that you can really find the fulfilling work. This is what I can say. The fourth one, this is something that I try to apply even at this age, and I think there is no age for that. Staying curious is important, right? So we just touched upon the fact that things are changing so fast, and we cannot even keep up with the new platforms, the trends, the vibes. I mean, the whole summer was about this, breath summer and everything. So I am just swamped with so much information, and it is overwhelming. And I am sure it is the case for younger colleagues and generation as well. But I think we got to find ways to draw lines and set some boundaries to take care of also our well-being. I mean, this constant flow of information can even be disheartening at times. So I really recommend everyone to take regular offline breaks and find activities to recharge them outside just scrolling things down or swiping things right and left. And last but not least, don't forget about the big picture, the social impact. Whatever we are doing here in Brussels, anywhere else, we are contributing to the democratic exercise. Let's not forget this, which has or will have an impact on the broader public. As we touched upon earlier, like the giver's mentality is super important here. So I really would like everyone to keep that with them and show up with the joy of giving in whatever they do, and always think about the big picture.
Great. Awesome advice, Gökşen. Thank you so much. So build relationships, don't shy away from polishing your social skills, be it communicating or sales and storytelling, negotiation skills, of course. Be open-minded about the job titles. This is actually a great advice because I feel like every year, obviously now I've been also in the field for 10 years, so I cannot maybe 100% relate to the younger demographics, but there are so many new job titles out there that weren't there when I was looking for a job. And sometimes we are very narrow-minded. We can be very narrow-minded with what we are looking for because we don't know what some titles or some descriptions entail. So it's always a good idea to be open-minded, as you suggested, to see what else might be out there for you to start your journey. And it will evolve from there anyway. Staying curious while taking a lot of offline breaks for mental health and for inward thinking also, and seeing the big picture. I think that's very good advice. Thanks for that. Now we are ready for our recommendations, I think. So Gökşen, what are your recommendations for us this week?
I had a huge list, so let's see how many of them we will tackle. I want to start with a book by Royal May, who is an American psychotherapist, because we touched upon the psychology a little bit earlier. And he's a psychotherapist alongside like Viktor Frankl, many might know, that helped create and popularize in a way existential psychotherapy. Anyways, he's also an artist, by the way. And he tackles the creativity, the phenomenology of, let's say, the creativity and creative processes. And his book, The Courage to Create, this is the one that I would like to recommend, is about that. Maybe an example that I can give, I'm assuming that everyone has had this experience, like working on something and feeling stuck or uncertain, and then you are all of a sudden enlightened or surprised by a sudden insight, right? While you are doing the dishes, walking your dog, or just, running, etc. So the book really tackles this, and it is fascinating for anyone who wants to understand how creativity happens within one's mind and conscious, and also the unconscious. I must say it is a hard read. First time I came across this book probably was more than 10 years ago, and it is still one of my pillow books that I open up and read from time to time. So I think that's the first one. Secondly, maybe a movie that I recently watched, which is called Wag the Dog. So it's from 1990s, end of 1990s, I think. So it's a political satire. There is this PR expert and a Hollywood producer that fabricate a war to distract the public from a presidential sex scandal, showcasing the power of media to shape the perception, or let's say manipulate the perception. So manipulation of public opinion through media and communication, that's a great watch that I could recommend everyone. And I can see, oh my God, this is still happening, which is the sad part. I can maybe recommend a podcast purely on communication, and this is called Think Fast, Talk Smart. It is hosted by Matt Abrahams. He's a lecturer of strategic communications at the Stanford graduate school of business, and he every episode he sits with experts in the field of comms, diplomacy, and they discuss the real world comms challenges. And I love it. I really cannot get enough of it. I recommend it everyone. And last thing, maybe on the accounts and newsletter side. So there is this gentleman called Ezra Imans I very much look up to when it comes to the new trends in the news media industry, particularly. He is the strategy director at NPO currently. It's the Dutch public broadcasting organization. And he previously worked with Media House, where Euractiv belongs in as a family. And he has this newsletter called Wayfinder. And it's a gem for those who are really interested in navigating the changing news and media landscape. A weekly newsletter that really brings everything together. So I'm also a big fan of that.
It's great to see newsletters back in the area of also our weekly recommendations. I feel like they had gone for a bit, but they've made a big comeback in 2024, definitely. My recommendation this week is also a podcast. It's called Social Europe Podcast. It's actually not a live one. I think they haven't launched new episodes recently, but it touches upon some of the topics that we covered today. So I still wanted to recommend it. Each episode, there's an interview with discussions on current affairs affecting the EU, with a focus on the societal and political impact of digitalization. Usually these are the episodes discussing inequality, education, migration, and more. And I thought it could be still relevant for people that haven't listened to it before to go back and check some of those episodes. So with that, we come to the end of our episode today. Thank you so much for joining us, Gökşen, and for all your brilliant insights and your experience, sharing your knowledge with us. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
And the pleasure is mine.
Thank you very much. And thank you all our online audience, listeners and watchers too, for joining us today. And we will see you again next week. Bye.